I've been trying to do more videos with my glasses off because I have had some fussing about the glare, and I am sorry about that, but you know, I'm on a limited budget to do these videos, so I don't have the funds right now to go out and buy a big fancy camera system and all that. So I have the basics here that I'm trying to do the best I can with. So I do apologize about the glare off my glasses, and if they're not absolutely required, I will try to do videos without my glasses, but when I'm doing book talks with like my notes and stuff, I'm gonna need my glasses so that I can tell that everything is still in focus and everything looks alright. So I don't want to have to film a whole video and have me like way over there and not even know it. So okay, so I want to start. The first book I guess I'll start with is 5 Days Left by Julie Lawson Timmer. And if you see me looking down a lot, it's because a number of these arcs I have are digital copies, so I don't have the physical copies to flip through, so I'll be looking at my note cards so I can remember. But I go through a lot of books, so I'd have to write down what all I was thinking while I was writing them. So, okay, anyway. 5 Days Left, Julie Lawson Timmer. This book was published September 9th of this year, so just a few days ago. It starts with the story of Mara, who is dying of Huntington's disease, and she decides that she's going to kill herself before the disease takes full toll on her and ends her life for her. And so the title of the book references the story starting 5 days before the day she picks to be her last day on Earth. Simultaneously, there is also a story of what were their names? Scott and Lori, I think. They are foster parents to this little boy named Curtis. Lori is also pregnant with her first biological child, and Scott is really attached to Curtis, but Lori, she kind of gets into her own bun in the oven mother mode where she's like, I'm worried about this one here. Curtis is cool. He's kind of your project. So Scott and Curtis develop a really close bond, and then Scott gets news that he has 5 days left before he has to return Curtis to his biological mother, who is a drug addict. She's in and out of jail, and she's just finished a stint in rehab, and the courts decide, because she is the biological mother, they're gonna let her try to have Curtis back and see how it goes. So those are the two parallel storylines. And Mara, the story the book starts with, she's also a foster parent to a child as well. So she is involved in this online support group for people that have foster children, adoptive children, or single parents, that sort of thing. So that plays into the storyline as well. I originally got this arc through the Penguin Books First Reads program, and I didn't know a lot going into it. There was like just a little blurb of a synopsis, and I don't know, just from that little blurb I got the impression that it might turn out to be what I called mom-lit. And hopefully this won't offend moms out there, but I just mean that as the type of books that I see a lot of, maybe not necessarily my generation or younger, but when I was growing up, I saw a lot of moms would read similar types of books that had to do, they all seem to have to do with, well, obviously children and motherhood and things like that, but they also involved like the you know, like those stories about the mother who's overwrought and she and her girlfriends go on a beach vacation and they just sit in chairs by the beach and talk about their lives and their husbands, and that's sort of like the premise of the book, is everybody goes to a beach house and bitches about their husbands and decides if they're really happy or not, that kind of thing. And in my head I always kind of deemed that as mom lit, basically the kind of thing I don't really have anything to relate to in my own life. And so I'm usually hesitant with those books because I don't have enough in my own life to find relatable characters, and so I hesitate going into them too much, but I'll give them a shot every now and then. And I have read some that I do like, even with my limited interpretation of what that situation might be like. So that's what I that was sort of like a little bit of a preconceived notion I had going into this. But like I said, I was still going to give it a try and see how it went. And the opening line of the book is, Mara had chosen the method long ago, pills, vodka, and carbon monoxide. And I read that first sentence, I was like, all right, well, this doesn't sound like any mom lit I remember. So I was thinking, oh, hey, cool, maybe this will be in, like, I don't know, like the sort of taut writing style. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of a Gone Girl vibe. I don't know. So I was optimistic going in, saying, oh, hey, maybe this will be like a cool, I don't know, psychological thing. So the first few chapters of that rang pretty true to that for me. And then about 50 pages in, I think that was around 4 or 5 chapters, somewhere in there, I noticed my interest in the story started slipping a little bit, because that tension of the writing, it started to fade away, and then it started going into the sort of maudlin ramblings of Mara. I don't know, I just feel like her story, I mean, I don't know a lot about Huntington's disease. I can't say that I know anybody that's had it. I do have a long history of cancer victims in my family. So I have experienced and seeing when I was a CNA, having patients that were suffering from slowly debilitating diseases that would sometimes end up terminal. So I do have some visual of what these kind of diseases look like in the end. So I could get what she was saying about feeling really lost and hopeless and frustrated with the pain and everything. I get all of that, but in the end, I didn't find Mara, just as a character, just as a woman, terminal disease or not, I just didn't find her character that likable. She just really hammered on the woe is me, fuck my life vibe, and it just, there was very little optimism in her. And I mean, obviously I get that because she got to the point where she just wanted to kill herself, but it's just really hard for me to just, it's just page after page after page of my life sucks and everything. But at the same time, you're reading about her husband that will do anything for her to make her more comfortable, her daughter who loves her unconditionally and just wants to spend all the time in the world with her, and you just think, why does she not see this? And it's just, it would frustrate me, because all of these things that her husband would try to do to make her life better would just go over her head, and she would just be locked into this, my life sucks and I just need to get out of this, I just need release. And you just want for her to stop bitching and see the blessings she does have. But I don't know, I just had a really hard time with her not ever pulling out of that. I don't know, I just couldn't get over, just, this is gonna sound really harsh, but there was just this feeling of her being ungrateful, really. She's in this good marriage, a loving marriage, where her husband just fawns all over her. She's got a child that loves her unconditionally. She's got a good financial setup. She has a nice home and a lot of things going for her, but she just can't get around the pain. It's almost like, when you read the story, it almost sounds like from the minute she's diagnosed, she just gives up, almost. And I just, with the experiences I've had in hospitals, those kind of patients always frustrated me, because I desperately wanted them to fight, and sometimes you get a patient that just doesn't have fight in them, and it's heartbreaking, and to be honest, it's annoying. I mean, it sounds harsh, but it is annoying when you have somebody that won't fight for all the good things they have. So it was really hard for me to like Mara. And the thing with Mara is she's doing these sort of like her, figure out how to word this. She's doing sort of like a pre-suicide checklist of things she needs to get done, and one of those includes writing the final letters to a bunch of people. And in her husband's letter, she puts this line that says, "Please allow yourself to be relieved and know that when you finally do, my soul will finally be freed." And I was just thinking, really? That after your husband loving you unconditionally, that's what you're going to leave him with, is just please allow yourself to be relieved? I mean, it just struck me as sort of, I don't know, it sort of like dismissed his, to me anyway, it sort of dismissed his love for her. And, you know, it sort of negated him feeling loss for her and mourning her. It was just like, no, just get over it and be relieved. I know you want to, and when you get to that point, my soul will be free. It's just again, it struck me as selfish to think that, you know, my life sucks and I'm going to continue to make your life suck with these negative last words. I don't know, that was my interpretation anyway. So another thing with the writing, mentioning the writing slowing down for me, I remember reading I think it was at the 91 page mark, there's like the separations in the story where it says how many days are left. After 91 pages, this break page happens where it says 4 days left. And I was reading going, holy shit, I've been reading for almost 100 pages and we're only into 1 day. And the book is barely over 350 pages. So it's just like, move it along. It's just, oh. And then, I hope people don't find this super offensive, but the book just read like a highlights reel of sad Lifetime movie themes for me. I mean, they talk about terminal illness, suicide, drug addiction, struggles of foster parenting, struggles of IVF treatment. And those are serious topics. It's just when you try to crush them all into one book, it, to me, feels like a bit much. So, yeah, it was a struggle. I did read it to the end, but it was a bit of a struggle for me. I liked a lot of the couples at first, but as the story progresses, they seem to fall into more and more selfish behavior and attitude. I did like Scott. I think Scott seemed to be the closest to being someone I would want to know more about, because he seemed like a good stand-up guy that really was trying to do the best he could in the situation he was in. And you know, there's a part where Lori gets I started liking her, and then I got to a point where I was like, God, she's really turning into a bitch. And then she sort of redeems herself at the end with an act she does for Scott in the final pages, where I'm like, alright, she's still got some redemptiveness in there. And the relationship between Scott and Curtis, I think, was my favorite, because those two, as a father and son couple, were so adorable, and their conversations were so sweet with each other. That was the thing that probably kept me reading the most, is I just wanted to see how Scott and Curtis's storyline turned out. I don't like to blatantly say don't read this book to people, because I don't think that's fair. When you watch my reviews, if I give what sounds like a negative review to a book, that's just my interpretation. I still encourage everyone to go out, and if the storyline sounds like something that's interesting you, by all means go out and find out for yourself, and it could be a favorite for you. And, you know, I don't judge you for that. These are just my impressions of my readings. So that one is the newest release coming out. And then I have the second newest one. It was one I was sent earlier this just a few months ago, really, this summer. I was sent World Class by J.C. Elkin. There we go. Okay. This is a collection of poetry that JC wrote inspired by her experiences teaching ESL students. If you're not familiar, ESL is English as a second language. I told JC that I would be happy to review this because I grew up very close to the Mexican border, and I grew up in ESL communities and had a lot of friends who were ESL students. So I was curious what her poems had to say, and I actually really liked it. Admittedly, poetry is not typically my favorite genre to read. I'm kind of picky about the poetry I end up liking. The poets I do like are classic poets. I have, like, my favorite poet ever is Dorothy Parker, and then I would say after that I love Pablo Neruda. Those are typically the ones I gravitate to. I love Langston Hughes. It's just modern poets, I think. Like the free form poets I struggle with a little bit because I don't know. It's to me it can verge a little bit on like open mic at the coffee shop kind of thing where people just get up and read whatever, and sometimes you're like, what are you even talking about? So, and that's hard for me to say because I have a number of friends who are respected poets in their communities. I have one close friend I grew up with, and she's a really respected poet in the Austin poetry scene, and it's hard for me to say that, you know, I struggle with getting into poetry, but we've been friends for years. I've gone to her poetry readings before as support, and she knows I'm still putting myself out there. I'm still trying. I'm always on the lookout for poets that do speak to me, and I'm not like so for this book, World Class, I do like that her poems address struggles of people from various ethnicities, various life situations and cultures. She doesn't just focus on Hispanic culture, which is originally what I thought it was going to be. And she does talk about Hispanic ESL students, but she also talks about people coming over from India and Iran, I think. We don't really talk about the immigrants from there coming and taking ESL classes, but it's part of the environment as well. And she has a poem in here, Hala, that mentions Malala Yousafzai, I think it's pronounced. Malala was in the news not too long ago. She's pretty well known now for her autobiography, I Am Malala. She's a young woman that when she was a girl was actually shot in the face by the Taliban for being so bold as to pursue her education against Taliban rules. And she basically stood up to the Taliban and said, screw you guys, I want to be book smart, I want to get an education. And so since then she's been an advocate for women and young girls all over the world to fight for an education regardless of what cultural situation you're in. And so she has a pretty nice poem in here that it's not about Malala, but it references her. JC has really beautiful phrasing in this book. She uses things like dust storms of change, or my favorite, she mentions thunderous incomprehension, because I fight that myself a lot. I was also impressed that she mentions Raynaud's disease, which is something that's I don't hear a lot of talk about, but it's something that affects both my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law. I'm kind of surprised it didn't strike my husband, but it's a disease that the most common symptom, at least from what I've experienced with my in-laws, is when you get in the cold, your hands turn this dark purpley color because the circulation, it affects your body's circulation, and it's the kind of thing where, like, if you press on your skin, it'll stay purple, and it'll take forever. Usually on healthy skin, you can press and it'll go white right away. And with Raynaud's, they press on it and it takes forever for it to pop back. So I was pretty impressed that there was a poem that mentioned that in there. There's also a poem called Young Means Forever Unchanging that has a really sweet, warm, fuzzy ending, which was not all the poems in here do. I think my favorite one in here was Foreign Soil. I think it was maybe the very first one in here. Just to give you guys a taste. Foreign Soil says, my students arrive in dust storms of change. Denims, saris, suits, all ages, from Persia's Gulf to Ganges banks, desert sands, Andes peaks, blood red, rank, poor lands, carrying seeds of rich loam through arid, rocky, barren years, acclimating, blooming in time, soaking up language's miracle grow. They till the words until the words that prick their ears at last make sense, sprouting from their tongues in accents lush as rustling crop leaves. I think that was the shortest poem in here, but just the wording I just loved in that one. The only downside to this one is, and it could have just been my misinterpretation, I'll say that now, but there were a couple lines in some of the poems that just struck me as having just a little tinge of cultural insensitivity or intolerance, but when I thought about it later, that could have been JC actually just trying to bring to light the frustrations that come from a classroom situation when you have language barriers, and maybe I just misinterpreted that as cultural insensitivity, so I will say that. But yeah, I definitely recommend this, and for all these books I will put links down below if you're interested in checking them out yourself. So the next one I have was one I was sent a while ago, but it had to be shelved because right after the time I was sent this, my mom fell sick, and a lot of my book reviewing kind of fell by the wayside while I was waiting for my mom to get stronger. So I have Infidelity, Exploding the Myths. Yes, Exploding the Myths. I always want to say exploring, but yeah, Exploding the Myths by Julia Hartley Moore. Julia's publishing company, I think it's called Bay Media. I think they run out of either Australia or New Zealand. One of their representatives contacted me a while back and asked if I would take a look at this and review it. There's a 2011 edition of this, and then this was sort of the revised copy. I think this one came out December of last year. Like I said, I'm behind on some of these. And so I will put links to either copy, either edition down below if you're interested in checking this out, whichever edition works better for you. I mainly was interested in this because I was told that Julia is dyslexic, and so am I. Like I've mentioned in past videos, I'm what I call a functioning dyslexic. If you wonder about that watching some of my videos, I use the same trick in my videos as I did when I wrote papers in high school. I edit the crap out of things so that people don't see too much of the bumbly bits. But these videos, when I first started YouTube, I didn't know, like my first couple videos are kind of long because I left everything in there. I didn't know how to edit. When I finally figured out how to cut crap out of my videos with the program I have, these things get cut way down from what they originally look like. Because not only reading, I also seem to have a sort of entertaining verbal dyslexia, so which I leave in sometimes just for your guys' humor's sake. So anyway, I was told that Julia was a dyslexic, so I was curious in reading a book written by a dyslexic because you don't come across them a lot. People assume that because you have dyslexia you can't read, and some people who have severe cases of it, that may be true, but there are situations where you can learn to work around it and not necessarily get past it, because I don't know, in my case I've never been able to fully conquer it, but you can learn to work around it. So I was curious about that. Other than that, I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't request this. They just asked me if I would mind taking a look at it, and at first I was a little bit hesitant because, sorry, I'm having a lot of shedding issues. At first I was a little hesitant to read it because I wasn't having infidelity issues, so didn't know how my husband was going to take it if he saw this laying around. But I just decided, screw it, I'm just, gonna have a sense of humor about it. So when he first saw it, I was like, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so he had kind of a laugh over it too, especially after I told him one of the stories in this book features a guy that has his name. So and it turned into another joke of like, yeah, that's right. So anyway, I don't know a lot about, well, see, this is why I have the glasses on, because I'm like sitting here like this. Okay, so I don't know a lot about Julia Hartley Moore, but when I did some looking up on her, according to what I've read, it says that she's a well-respected PI, private investigator, that works throughout Australia and New Zealand. She has a few books out. This is just one of them. And this uses not only examples of cases she's worked, but also her own situations and her own experiences with infidelity to talk about how to spot it, how to fight it maturely. Some of the cases she uses, I don't know if she puts it in as an example of how not to do things, because there are a lot of funny stories in there. If you click on, I'll put the link down to the written out review I wrote of this, and I put a lot more detail into things I liked in the book that I pulled out. But if you click on that, I noted some of the stories that I thought were really funny or really catching, that they blew my mind when I read them. Julia herself has an amazing story. She survived date rape at 15, and from that date rape, she found out she was pregnant, and because of the time she was growing up in, she was forced to marry her assailant and have the child. And then before she was even out of her teens, she had 3 more children. I think they said 3 children under a year old before she had her 20th birthday. It's crazy. Understandably, that marriage didn't work out, and she talks about how she worked through a number of other, she struggled through a number of other unhealthy relationships and marriages until she did end up getting to a place where she could start her own business, and she ended up finding the love of her life and into a really stable life and a really respected position. And so it's really impressive how she can have this story of overcoming so much and showing other people that, it's not that it's not traumatizing, but you don't have to feel like it's the end of the world. If you can persevere through seemingly unsurmountable bad situations. So I really liked that aspect of it, and her story just proves that you're not your past. It can influence who you are as a person, but it doesn't have to be who you are, which I can say from my own past. I've had some really ugly situations in my past, and yet I don't hold it against those people, and I'm able to remain other than my off days, I remain a relatively upbeat, optimistic person. So, you're not your past. One thing I did really like is she does point out that affairs don't just happen. She has a thing where she says guys like to use the excuse that, well, it was an accident, it just sort of happened, that kind of thing, and she calls bullshit on them and says your clothes don't just fall off when you're walking down the street. It doesn't just happen. It's something that has to be, at least on some level, premeditated, thought out, planned. At some point you make the conscious decision to betray the other person in your life. And I really liked that she brought that up, because I get so frustrated with hearing people, oh, it just happened. Well, it's like my husband and I have had friends that have been in situations where they have cheated on a spouse, and they come to one of us, being the friend, and saying, oh, I don't know what happened, it was an accident. And as my husband likes to say, you don't just trip and fall into a vagina. You make an active decision to continue on that path. And then she also has this bit that sort of reminded me of that whole "he's not into you" thing. It says, "We've all heard the expression talk is cheap, but that's pretty hard to remember when someone you adore is whispering sweet nothings in your ear. However, in order to be protected from a con man, whether he's after your money or your heart, here's a great test you can do. If he's the kind of guy who talks a lot about what he's going to do, and in particular what he's going to do for you, treat him like a television set and put him on mute. Don't listen to what he says he'll do, but see what he actually does. An example of this is when someone you meet says they'll telephone you tomorrow. A week goes by and you hear nothing, and then they call and say they've been too busy and they just haven't had the time to call. Let's be honest, that's rubbish. It literally takes seconds to dial a number, but the number of people that use that excuse are huge. So then when you go out with someone and you have sex together, but 2 weeks go by before you hear from him again, and then when you do, he comes up with all sorts of reasons of why he hasn't been able to contact you. Let's be honest. The truth is that if you really want somebody, you'll contact them come hell or high water. Just as if you broke your leg, you were going to go to the hospital and have it fixed rather than hobble around for a day saying, oh hell, I just haven't got the time. So, yeah, I was really glad she brought that up too, because that's what I always tell my friends is, if you are really interested in somebody, you will find time for them. You will find a way to make it happen. Whether it's an email, a phone call, whatever, a note, a sticky note, I don't know. You will find a way to connect with them. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. The one part I had a little bit of an issue with, there's a part in here where she says, I actually think there's a time and a place when a revenge affair can be beneficial. It may sound shocking to hear me suggesting this, that you should even consider such a thing, but this is about real life and there is no right or wrong way to act in these situations. It's a matter of trial and error for each of us, but when life goes haywire, as in dealing with infidelity and its aftermath, it's whatever helps you get through that counts. You might start seeing why I had an issue with this. This is where female virtue can be a hindrance rather than help. Two wrongs don't make a right, but they make a good excuse. And I don't know, I've just always had an issue with the idea of revenge sex or revenge relationships. That's different than a rebound. Now, a rebound is just when the relationship is over, you know it's over, and if once the relationship is over, I don't care what you do. If you want to immediately jump into another one, I don't judge. But when you're still on the line with somebody, when you're still possibly trying to work it out, if you're deciding it's done, even if you're deciding it's done and you just haven't told the person, I just have an issue with, if you don't want to be with that person, cut it off. Just be upfront, be honest, be considerate of that person, and just cut it off. Let them loose. Don't hold on to one and then try to have this over on the side. And that was one thing that was immediately established in the early days with my husband when we first started dating, because we had both had experiences with people cheating on us, and when we got together, I immediately told him, as soon as we got to a point where we knew it was going to be a serious relationship and committed relationship, I immediately told him, okay, if you ever get to a point where you don't want to be here anymore, I will take no offense as long as you're upfront about it and you say, either come to me and say you're having doubts, come to me and say we need to talk about things, or come to me and say I just don't want to do it anymore. But at least come to me and say it. Don't do stuff behind my back and then try to drag it out and have it all messy and then have us break up. Just rip the Band-Aid off when the relationship stops working. Which has always been my thing. It's just, if it's going south, that's fine. Just have enough respect for the other person not to do the revenge sex thing. Because it doesn't make you any better than them. And then you have the guilt of why did I stoop to their level? You know, at least for me, that's my thing. And so I had a little bit of an issue with her recommending some situations where revenge sex might be a good thing. It's like, you want to do revenge sex? Break up with them, go get a hot outfit, and then show off your new guy. Do it that way, because then at least they're free and they can see what they lost. Don't do it when you're still with them in any form. So that I kind of cringed at, especially when she was recommending women do that, but then she contradicts herself down here, or at least to me it sounded like a contradiction, where she says, sorry, I should mention, she has one particular chapter in here that's called Chapter 7, A Word to the Guys. It's just directed at guys who may be thinking of being unfaithful, maybe already have been unfaithful. This whole chapter is completely directed right at them. And she says, for all those philanderers out there, what I find so incredible about this whole issue of infidelity is that there's a bunch of you out there who meet, find attractive, and finally fall in love with women, have children with them, and then, without any regard for the family they helped create, go about making their lives a misery through your selfishness and total lack of respect. You've made choices, and now you have to man up and accept the responsibilities that come with these choices and the devastating effects they have on your family's lives. It's not all about you. The two most overused responses men offer when confronted with their infidelity are, she was just someone I could talk to because we were having problems, and I just need to move out for a few months so I can sort myself out. Yeah, right, that makes a whole lot of sense. It's really helpful to rebuild your relationship with your wife by having sex with someone else. Well, then you just told the women to go have revenge sex while they're still in their marriages and whatnot. And it makes even more sense to try to fix your relationship when you've removed yourself from it. And then you honestly wonder why you can't seem to get that old level of intimacy back and those old feelings of love. You'll say, how can I when this woman is always on my case? She's prying into my every move and constantly rehashing the past at every opportunity. What will it take before you guys get it? Remaining faithful is all that's required, and that means being devoted, dependable, reliable, constant, and truthful. How hard is that? There's no magic ingredient to a successful, happy relationship full of fun, love, and passion. When a woman knows in her heart that she's the one, the only one, and she feels that she can fully trust her man, then the flames of passion will burn bright. Like, yeah, that's true, but it's a bit of a contradiction when you just said that, you know, there's circumstances where a woman can feel right in having revenge sex or a revenge relationship. I don't know. That part bothered me. Aside from that, though, I really did like the book. I think there's a lot she brings up that is really useful. She doesn't just talk about the infidelity. She also talks about the aspects and the intricacies of just relationships in general and learning how to communicate in a healthy way and learning how to successfully be with your partner so it doesn't get to that point where they may think about cheating. In other cases, she talks about if you do think they're cheating, how you can spot it. And the one controversial part is there's also a chapter in the book on how to pull off a affair from the point of view of a private investigator. But she does explain why she puts that in there, and she does have a point of bringing that up. So I do recommend that one, and I would say not necessarily waiting until it happens. I think it's a good read to just make yourself aware and educated in learning how to communicate with your partners so you don't find yourself in that situation. And the writing itself, you know, it's written by a woman, so it's geared towards women that may have or may think they may suffer an infidelity. But I think even guys will find helpful tips in there, and maybe that might help to learn the female perspective. I'm not sure, but yeah, I do recommend that one. That one was about a 4 for me. And then the last one I was going to talk about today, a little nonfiction book, ebook I was sent a while back, and it's called How to Overcome Heartbreak Without Projectile Vomiting. by Stefanie Flaxman. This was published May 2013, I believe. Flaxman is the creator of revisionfairy.com, and she works as a freelance writer, editor, and proofreader. And with this book, she approaches heartbreak not necessarily just from a romantic connotation, but just heartbreak in general. Like when things just aren't working out your way, how to process the pain of being disappointed by life. And I can relate to her approach, which she says, to wax optimistic with acidic essence, positivity cocktails with a twist, which is kind of how I look at my outlook in life. Is I tend to be mostly optimistic, but there is just a tinge of jadedness in my natural being. So I was like, yeah, I could feel a kindredness there. As she puts it, this book is meant to focus on responses to loss and change, and it's for individuals interested in overcoming heartbreak by examining emotions, questioning behaviors, monitoring reactions, dismissing notions of right and wrong, and surpassing limited ideas of truth. I really like that idea, the limited ideas of truth. I think a lot of people are hampered by that. There's a lot of cool, catchy phrases and thoughts she puts out there that kind of have you thinking. Some of my favorites were, when you take offense, you magnify that offense. You only embark on journeys when you want to discover the unknown more than you want to stay comfortable. Overcoming heartbreak is accepting that a change has occurred, and heartbreak is fighting that change. Situations that are meant for you don't make you feel rejected. Like, yeah, how about that? The other thing with this is she uses the metaphor of the writing process, because she's a writer and an editor and whatnot. She uses the process of writing as a metaphor for how to process emotions, kind of like using the editing process of how to edit your emotions and how to cut out negativity and things like that, which works in the beginning, but for me, after a while, it kind of felt like she got bogged down by that metaphor, and some of it started to feel forced after a while with her trying to make that metaphor fit with what she was saying. It might have worked better if she just used it in the beginning and then just left it at that. So that was one little downside I had with it. But along the writing and literature metaphor, she had one line that cracked me up. How do we end up in situations that require literary Drano? Which I think bookworms will appreciate, because how many times when we get bogged down with things and depressed by things, how often do we say, God, I need a book for that. I just want to get lost in a book right now. I don't want to think about it. I just want some sort of fantastical escapism right now to just purge my mind. At least that's what it reminded me of. So the book explores themes of fear and self-doubt and how to process that. A lot of what she talks about, it's not, I guess part of the problem I had with this one is she doesn't bring up anything really new, really earth-shattering, like, oh, I never looked at it that before. A lot of what she brings up is it's all stuff we've all heard of before, and my issue with this is it wasn't really presented in any, earth-shattering new way. There wasn't anything. It's not that it wasn't true what she was saying, it just didn't really stick with me because I had heard it in a lot of other places before, and as painfully honest as it is to say, there are places I've read it better presented. I think probably because her message got a little bit lost with me with the, like I said, being bogged down with the writing metaphor and trying to make that fit. There is some good message in here where, like, one thing she says that did kind of make me think is, she said, some pain is temporary while others get tattooed on the soul. And people tend to learn how to adapt and transform according to the circumstances and severity of the pain, and the transformation can be good or bad, which is true. There are some good bits in there. One of the parts I kind of laughed a little bit and cringed a little bit is there was a part in here where she says, 7 lies friends and family tell you to make you feel better. And some of it she was right on. But then there were a few other parts in this list where I thought her reasoning was a little bit off. Like she says, one of the lies is when people say, it'll be okay. Her response is, it won't be okay, you'll be a different person. Actually, yeah, you will be a different person, but in all honesty, it will be okay. If you want it to be okay, it'll be okay. People do get over things. You know? When you grow up, the shit that bogged you down in high school will not matter. The class you're not necessarily passing right now, and I speak from experience because I remember in high school being, I think I was in an algebra class, and I was struggling because with my dyslexia, I struggled a lot with numbers especially, and when you're taking algebra, you can't do that with equations because it fucks up the whole equation. And I was constantly getting my numbers twisted around, and I couldn't seem to break myself with that. So I got horrible grades in algebra, and I was an honor student, and I was struggling, and I was freaking out because I was one of those people that, you know, nobody would really allow me the freedom of getting a bad grade. Everyone expected me to get super high grades, and when I was struggling with a class, my parents would not accept that I was struggling or that I wasn't understanding something. You know, for some reason, I don't know if they thought had a drug problem or I was being lazy or what. They basically told me to snap out of it. And I remember going through this class. I think I had to take it 2 or 3 times, and I took summer classes, and obviously I graduated high school, so I did finally push through it, but I struggled like a bitch trying to get through these algebra classes. And I remember at the time thinking my life was over. There's nothing that is going to push me through this. You know, my life is screwed. How am I going to get past this? This is going to affect my life forever. And yeah, in a way, I guess it did affect my life in that I didn't go to an Ivy League college. I did go to college, though. Yeah, I didn't go to Stanford or Harvard or anything like that, but had I been born into the right family with the right connections, I could have probably gotten past the algebra thing. But I do remember at the time, I thought there was no way my life was going to get past that, and that mentality followed me through a lot of other situations. Jobs that I thought were going to kill me. Relationships that I thought were going to kill me. Health issues that I was sure I was going to die from. You know, it's just, as long as you have the positive point of view that, and you give yourself the ultimatum, I am going to get through this, I am going to find a way out of this, I am going to find an answer, it's going to get better. So, her saying it won't be okay, that kind of bothered me. Okay, so the next lie, she says, time will help. She says that's a lie that your friends and family will tell you. She says, rip off your denial like a Band-Aid and deal with the heartbreak presented to you. Time will help. I have a number of experiences that have taught me, given enough time and allowing yourself to feel what you need to feel and not letting anybody tell you what you need to feel, just letting your body go through its own process, however it wants to do that with you, will fix it. As long as you give it time and you don't let other people force you into their time frame. For example, when my mom lost my dad, my mom took my dad's death really, really hard. Understandably, she is still fighting depression from not having my dad around. And I heard a number of people after she wasn't even out of her first year of widowhood when I started hearing people say, get over it already. You know, he's not coming back. You know, you've had your period. And I'm still fighting people where I tell them, get off her case. You didn't lose a husband. You don't know how long it takes for somebody to get over that. They had their own little relationship. There's nobody that can tell you when enough time is enough. And so I've been a real advocate of telling people to back off of her. And not just her, I've told it to a lot of other people too, when somebody has suffered a loss. Even when I lost my dad, I would fight people and say, because I had people telling me after a few months, I had people in my own family telling me, you need to move on. I was like, I lost my father. It's like, even if I didn't have the best relationship with him when he went, that was my father. That was the guy responsible for putting me on this planet. There is some connection there that I need to process. I hate when people tell me you have a time frame to get over this before we start giving you an issue about it. You know, if it takes you years, like I said, my mom is still desperately mourning my dad. She still goes through really dark days. And I don't give her grief about that. I just try to take her out of it as much as possible, just so she's not wallowing in it. You know, I'm not saying that she can't have her feelings. I just don't want her to wallow in situations. So I think it's okay to be there for somebody and to try to get their mind off of it, just so they're not beating themselves with it. But if they want to grieve, let them grieve. If you want to grieve a job you really loved that you lost, you got laid off, give yourself time to do that. But I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm saying grieve in moderation, I guess is what I'm trying to get, is have your dark time, but don't let it ruin the rest of your life for you. But also don't let anybody say it's enough, you can snap out of it now, because that's bullshit as well. And then she says, friends and family will say, you'll find something better. To which she replies, positioning situations as better or worse makes you resent the past. Not necessarily. You need to appreciate past in order to move forward. You'll find something different and a better fit for who you are now. Isn't that just what they said? You'll find something better. That's like the people arguing that are arguing the same thing. Or she says, when people tell you you can't give up. Which her response just made my jaw drop. She says, give up. Something will appear even if you give up. Yeah, I mean, I guess. You know, before I met my husband, I guess I could have just sat in my apartment and hoped that he would have showed up at my front door. I guess, you know, the jobs I've had, I guess I could have hoped that the employer would come to my door and have something for me, just, you know, because they would show up and say, I had a sense that you needed a job. And like, and yeah, I guess if you just sit on your ass and let life go past, some things will come to you, but you have a lot better response if you get up off your ass and go find it yourself. in my experience. So yeah, don't give up. Get off your ass and go make it better. So I had some issues with that. So I don't know, that she had some good points she brought up, but I think the execution was a little off for me. So it was kind of like, could have almost been a 3, but it was kind of more of like a 2.5 on that one. So, all right, those are my arcs. I think probably my next video, I have an arc coming up for The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters, so that'll probably be one of my next videos. I'm still plowing through that one since it's almost, I think it's 568 pages long, something like that. It's kind of a chunkster. So I'm still plowing through that, but I have a digital arc of it that has one of those expiration dates on it, and I only have a few days left, so I don't want to get stuck being this close to the ending and not seeing it. So I'll have that up pretty soon, and I have another book to talk about in that video. So alright, stay tuned guys, have more videos coming up. I'll talk to you soon.